Our reading selection today is called Emma's Walk, and it's by Charles Bell, and it's illustrated by Soud. And before we get started, I wanted to explain that the story that we're going to read takes place in Harlem. And Harlem is a big neighborhood in New York City. And our story happens in the 1920s, which is about 100 years ago. And this time period is called the Harlem Renaissance. And during this time, many African American artists, musicians, writers, and different kinds of performers became recognized for their talent, their work, and their unique type of expression for the very first time. So, as we read, we're going to take a look at this genre that is historical fiction. Historical fiction. So the story takes place in the past. The events or problems in the story are from that time, and real things that happened or real people who lived at that time may be in the story. Okay, so we can learn about our history even though this is a fictional story. Our essential question is what makes a culture unique? And we will be using the comprehension strategy, asking and answering questions. And we're also going to be doing some visualizing. So remember, when you ask and you answer questions like the who, what, where, why, when, and how, it helps you understand the events that are happening in the story, and you can really think about what's going on in the story. And when you visualize, it helps you make that picture in your brain, in your mind, about what's happening. You can think about things like your five senses, like what would you see, what would you hear, what would you smell, what would you taste or touch when you are visualizing. So let's go ahead and read Emma's Walk. On a quiet morning, Emma and her grandmother walked through Harlem. Emma loved the sights and sounds of her neighborhood. Now, as I read this paragraph, I'm going to look at the illustrations and I think about a street that I know of early in the morning. And even in a city with many people, it can be kind of quiet early in the morning. However, I can imagine the hard pavement of the sidewalk and the sounds of doors opening and closing, maybe birds singing in the background. So imagine this street early in the morning. What would the sky look like as the sun is just starting to, come up? She's holding your grandmother's hand. So how would her hand feel, fitted inside of her grandmother's hand? And they're wearing coats, so I can imagine that the air is probably a little cooler, right? It's a little chilly outside. So, do you know, Emma, something beautiful is happening here, said Grandma. It was an exciting time in Harlem, a time of great importance. It was a time of hope for people who came to Harlem. They wrote, they performed, they created art. Their talents and ideas were seen and heard. Emma and her grandmother talked as they walked. Let me tell you about W.E.B. Du Bois, said Grandma. He is a writer. He published a magazine. What's that? Asked Emma. Something that prints interesting ideas, said Grandma. Emma and her grandmother continued. There's Langston Hughes, too, said Grandma. He's a poet. When you write poems, other people see and hear what you do, and they feel what you feel, too. So I wonder if I know any of the poems written by Langston Hughes. I know that he writes poems. We'll have to look up some poems by Langston Hughes and take a look at them. Do ladies write? Asked Emma. Oh, yes, said Grandma. Many do. Gwendolyn Bennett is one. She's a painter and a teacher, too. My favorite poems of hers begins, Some things are very dear to me. Am I dear to you, Grandma? Asked Emma. Oh, yes, said Grandma. Very. Do you hear the trumpet, Emma? It's coming from the music hall. Duke Ellington is practicing with his band, said Grandma. Listen, Emma, to the trumpets. Tap along with the drums. Duke Ellington writes jazz music. So as I read this paragraph, I can imagine the sound of Duke Ellington practicing jazz music with his band. I can hear the drum tapping and the trumpets singing out a melody. So think about what Emma and her grandma might be doing as they're walking down the street. Can you visualize? Maybe they're like swaying along to the music or dancing just a little bit, and you can see the music notes that are coming out. So even though it's just a picture, you know that there's music playing, even through that illustration. Emma heard and felt jazz everywhere in Harlem. She often sang along as she walked home from school. Today, she only listened. Emma, said Grandma, look over there at the tap dancers. Emma loved the beat of the tip-tapping feet. After reading this page, I imagine Emma singing as she takes big steps on the sidewalk. And I can also imagine the look and the sound of the tap dancers on those hardwood floors. Have you ever heard tap dancers before? It's a really cool sound. The sound of tap dancing almost sounds like music to me. Look, Grandma, who are those dancers? Asked Emma. The Nicholas brothers. They do an exciting style of tap. People see them in musicals and movies too. I can read that poster said Emma. It says, "Returning to the Cotton Club," she exclaimed. And the Cotton Club is an actual place, because remember, in historical fiction, sometimes there are real places that are in the story. Very good, Emma, Grandma praised proudly. Grown-ups from all over have come to the Cotton Club. Louis Armstrong plays his trumpet. Ella Fitzgerald sings. The audience sees our community's art, she explained as they walked on. After a while, they entered the hospital where Mama and Papa waited with a new baby, Joey. Inside, Grandma exclaimed, "Look at that!" "Who painted it?" Emma asked. "Vertus Hayes," said Grandma. "Isn't this mural wonderful?" There are many artists in our community. So I just wanted to take a look. A mural is a painting, but it's a painting that takes up a whole wall. And someone has made a painting of all of the art that is happening in their community. "Emma, do you understand why Harlem is so special?" asked Grandma. "I think so," said Emma. "It's our home. It's our community." "That's right, Emma. But there's another reason. There has never been a place like this before. We have great talent and great ideas. We want the world to see our culture and know what we can do. Harlem is a place. Harlem is like no place else in the world," finished Grandma. Now, Grandma says that Harlem is a place like no place else in the world. And I wonder what makes Harlem one of a kind. When I go back and I can reread, I think about all of the artists and the musicians and the performers that they've seen and talked about. And I think that's what makes Harlem so unique and a place like no place else. Before bed that night, Emma hugged her grandmother. Emma remembered the music of the performers warming up. She remembered conversations she overheard walking down the street. Emma was glad to be part of Harlem. In her dreams, she danced and sang. In school the next day, Emma thought and thought. "I'm ready," she said to herself as she took up her pencil and began to write. Now, at the end of the story, Emma's back in school, and I wonder what she's thinking about. She says she's ready for something. What do you think she's ready to do? You think she's writing a story to explain her culture? Or maybe she's writing a poem? Or maybe a song? I think she's ready to express her culture some way. Now, before I let you go, we are going to have to take a look at all of the vocabulary from this story today, because normally we would spend 2 days on a story this long, but since it's a short week, we can't. So let's go back and take a look at our very first, there it is, our very first vocabulary word. And I'm going to make sure that the sound is up to 100%. It is. The first word that we're going to talk about is talents. Their talents and ideas were seen and heard. Now, when you're talking about someone's talent, it's a special skill.
Talents. Plural form of talent. A special skill. This is one of her talents. She can juggle. Talents.
All right, talents are a special skill, and there are all kinds of talents. I know that all of you have talents of your own, a special skill. All right, the next word is magazine. And in the story, they're talking about W.E.B. Du Bois. And he's a writer and he publishes a magazine.
Magazine. A collection of stories, articles, and pictures.
Yep. We don't see magazines too often anymore. Sometimes in a doctor's office, you'll see a magazine, or maybe you've read a magazine before, or mom or dad. But it's just a collection of pictures and ideas and stories, and they put it together in a book form, a magazine. All right, the next one is band, and it says that Duke Ellington is practicing with his band, and a band is a group of musicians.
Band. A group of musicians who play together. The band plays music. Band.
All right, a group of musicians who play together is a band. In there, over. Now, over means across a distance. So you can see how Emma is pointing, and she said, look over there at the tap dancers.
Over. Across a distance or space. Over.
All right. Over means across a space. So I bet you've said that to someone before. Look over there, right? The next one is reason. Now, reason is, that's right, Emma, but there's another reason. And reason gives us the answer to the question why. Oops.
Reason. A statement that answers the question why. I pushed a domino. That is the reason they are fighting.
All right. Grandma is explaining to her the reason why Harlem is so special. She's answering the why. Why is Harlem so special? Well, the reason is there's never been a place like it before where people were expressing their culture the way that they did. And that brings us to the word culture.
Culture. The art, beliefs, and customs that make up the way of life for a group of people. The theory is a part of my culture.
Basically, the way we live is our culture, our beliefs, our food, our holidays, our art. Those are all things that make up our culture. And I think, is that the last one? That is the last vocabulary word. Okay, I will make sure that I include the discussion starters so that you can talk about this book or this story with your big person.